Good evening all, and welcome. Lately, my daughter Pandora has been staring into nothing and started to laugh. Started to move her eyes around and stare at things that are not there. At least, that's what I think. Maybe she's staring at nothing, or maybe something more. In any case, it has inspired me to make today's video a paranormal one. I hope you're ready, because it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. This is a collection of stories that happened throughout my life. Most of the stories come while growing up on a very old farm. And I want to mention, we never felt unwanted or unwelcome, or anything like that. When it happened on the farm, it was weird, sometimes scary when it happened. But afterwards, most of the time it was okay. Most of the time. I will give you a bit of background so that you guys have a better idea of how it works around here. I live in the Netherlands, in a village really close to the German border. My family is really big, and most of them from my dad's side are all farmers and butchers. We grew up on a farm as well, even when my dad had his own butcher shop. The farm that my dad owned had been in the family for almost 160 years. And has had a lot of bad things happen in its long history. For example, in the 1920s, two people who worked as helpers on the farm got into a fight, and one guy killed the other. We have the start of a really big bog on our property, and throughout living there, family members, as far as I know, all children, drowned there in the early 1900s. During World War II, my family helped a lot of people through that same bog, because it's really dangerous if you don't know your way around. A lot of German soldiers, as well as normal Dutch people, drowned there. The Germans found out we were helping them, and executed my granddad's father, and a couple of his brothers to make an example of them. A lot of stable fires throughout its time that you cannot explain. So like I said, a lot of things have happened. I'm going to tell these stories in chronological order. Story 1. When me and one of my sisters were younger at the time, my dad had next to the house a big field with Christmas trees for sale. So for me, at 6 years old, this was the perfect hiding place for hide and seek, because it's a maze of trees. My older cousin, who was 17 at the time, was searching for us, and me and my sisters were trying to hide. So we went naturally into the field with the Christmas trees. After, for what a small child felt like an eternity, we gave up and went looking for my cousin. Me and my sister thought we saw him through a window in one of the very old looking stables looking at us. So me and my sister run towards the stable with the only entrance/exit in our sights all the time when we run towards it. Surprisingly, there was nobody there. At that moment, our cousin came from behind the main house that was behind us. So he could never have been there. And at the time, we were the only three on the farm because he was babysitting us. We asked him if he was just in the stable, and he said no. So yeah, weird. Story 2. I was 8 at the time, and already had 6 brothers and sisters. Me being the oldest, so we had to room up. Me, my sister below me, and the brother below my sister had a room up in the attic. Throughout growing up there, we always felt when we were trying to sleep that our toes were being pinched. At first, we always thought it was one of us just goofing around. It was not. When I was younger, I had a lot of sleep paralysis, and at the time I didn't know what it was, only that it was scary. I later realized what it was, because it always happened in the very same scary Sesame Street dream that I had. I had that dream so many times while growing up, that when I had that dream, I realized I was in a dream, and somehow woke myself up but was paralyzed. Why am I telling this? Because one of those times it was different. I did not have that dream. I just woke up in a really awkward / turned around / backwards painful way, feeling a very cold hand smushing my head into the pillow. It was very hard to breathe. Luckily for me, my sister woke up to go to the toilet, and when she hit the lights, she screamed because I was lying so strangely. My sister and brother ran to my dad, and when my dad came up, whatever it was, the moment the door opened, I could move. And I know how people in the comment section are going to say it was still just sleep paralysis, but I knew the difference. This was way different. Like the cold hand which I'd never felt before. Like it started without that scary Sesame Street dream, the way it always does. But that's what I think. Story 3. This happened when I was 11. It was snowing very hard the night before, and I was helping my dad around the farm. Nobody went to the old stables, but there was a track of footprints going out of the stables. No tracks at all going towards the stables, only out. Nobody went near the stables at that time, because like I said, you would have seen it in the snow, and it was snowing heavily the night before. My mum and dad found this so weird that my dad went to follow the tracks with me, because the tracks were leading over a field towards the bog. I was very excited because me and my brothers and sisters are forbidden to go there because it is extremely dangerous. We disobeyed my dad once and my sister got stuck. She was chest deep in it, and I was holding her so that she wouldn't go in any deeper. My brother ran to my dad and everything was okay, but we got such a hard-ass whooping that had left such a big impression in our young minds that nobody had even thought of crossing the old man again for fear of his wrath. We followed it deep into the bog, and it led us towards frozen water, just frozen enough to maybe hold a small animal. Definitely not a grown man or even a toddler. I don't know if spirits can leave tracks, but we don't know what it was. If there was a track towards the old stables and a track out, it would have made sense, but it didn't. My dad was pretty spooked by this. Story 4. I was 13, and we were playing Mario Kart 64 on the Nintendo 64. My dad and my mum went to my dad's weekly game of billiards with his friend in the pub. We were old enough that we did not need a babysitter. Me and my sister acted as the babysitters. There was only one rule: never open the front door or back door for anybody, even if there was knocking. Even if there is someone you do know, don't open it. Just talk through the mailbox in the door. And when there was a problem, we had the phone number of the pub, as this was before mobile phones were big. We were playing with 4 controllers, and we switched regularly so that everyone had a turn, and everybody was in the living room and was focused hard on the TV screen. It was like watching the World Cup finals. I was on an epic losing streak, and in the corner of my eyes I saw a big black thing moving from left to right through the kitchen. I was so focused on getting at least one win to get back off my brothers, but I didn't look back. I only focused on the screen. When my sister said, "Who else saw that black thing in the kitchen?" From the 8 children, 5 of them, including me, said they saw it. Little old me did not want to call Dad and screw up and lose my babysitting privileges, because it's awesome when you get the house parents free as a 13-year-old little snotling. So me and my 2 brothers sucked it up, got up and searched everything. Under the beds, in the closets, the bathroom, everything. But nothing. The windows were still shut, so we waited until Dad came home, and he was angry that we were not in bed. So we told him what happened. He didn't say much and put us to sleep. That was a very scary night trying to sleep, and most important, I didn't lose my babysitting privileges. Number 5. This is not so much a story, because it happened many times growing up. And as far as I know, my dad says that it's still ongoing. It happened to him when he was little as well, as he grew up on the farm. In the middle of the night, a very loud knock on the front door would happen. Just one knock, every night. It happens at different times. You needed to already be awake, otherwise you wouldn't hear it. It is not the old house just making noises. I know every sound that the house makes. This is a knock. One knock on the front door. The same goes for the feeling of being watched a lot. There is something behind you. But weirdly not in the house. It's always in the stable or barns. And I think I've seen the person from the first story more times in the stable out of the corner of my eye than any other time. And they say animals can sense things. I think that's partially true. Like our farm dogs. They don't care. They go anywhere on the farm. We have 4 horses in that stable and they are never spooked. Only the cats act weird. Like they go in and terrorize the mice in there, but sometimes they refuse to go in at all, even when you pick them up and walk in. They're very weirdly meowing and making strange sounds that they never make. They're uncomfortable, and they scoot out pretty quickly. Growing up with a lot of children, those cats are the easiest going friendly animals out there, and they will allow you to do anything to them. But they will not stay in the barn sometimes. Number 6. In our village, there is an old textile factory in the middle of our village that's now closed. It opened in 1890 and shut in 1978. Back then, it was a ruin, and it's now been rebuilt into luxurious apartments. It's 4 stories high. Back then, it was a very scary looking building, and of course, filled with scary stories. When I was 17, it was a Saturday night, and me and 2 friends came from the pub, as back then, the legal drinking age was 16. They bumped it up to 18 a few years ago, sadly. So we had the brilliant idea to test our bravery and go into the factory. This was forbidden, and the factory was fenced off, but that did not stop us. We climbed the fence and entered. Mind you, we did not have proper cell phones like now, with their flashlights and all that. We made our way in almost total darkness. I know it was a stupid and dangerous move. When we were on the 3rd floor, after walking in a good couple of feet, our hearts dropped. We could hear something moving, very slowly, and when we stopped, it stopped as well. So we sprinted as fast as we could and got out as fast as we could manage. We were all freaking out. I think the alcohol has a lot to do with it as well. My friend was like, "Is this shit real?" And at the same time, we saw in the distance 4 younger teenagers running. My friend ran after them, and we followed my friend. We stopped the 4 boys and were like, "Were you guys in the factory?" At first they were scared of us, of course, like 3 older guys in hot pursuit of 4 younger guys, come on. But that's when they said that they were so relieved. We spooked each other. I know it's not a ghost story, but for a second we thought it was, and it's still a good story to tell. A couple of days later, I went in there alone during the day just to see how it looks. I discovered that we were very lucky, because on the 3rd floor in the middle part, it's all collapsed, and if you drop down 3 stories. We were incredibly lucky that we stopped walking when we did. Number 7. This happened when I was 25. One of my sisters had moved into a new house. It was very secluded. There were only 2 houses there, and a party center that was closed during the week. It opened on weekends, so the place was pretty quiet overall. After a month, I could see that something was bothering my sister, so I asked her, but she didn't want to tell me. I managed to get her to say, though, that some nights you could hear what sounded like a little girl crying softly at the front of her house, and it was freaking her out, because when she looked, there was nothing there, and it stopped when you opened the front door. So she asked me to sleep over, to see if I could hear it as well, and I agreed. On the first night, there was nothing, but on the second night, I heard it, and it was like she said, a little child crying softly, very softly. I looked, there was nothing there. I stayed for a 3rd night and it happened once more, and now my sister started crying, like she'd finally found her own place that she liked. And then this shit happened. Seeing my sister cry, I got annoyed at whatever was making the sound, so I opened the door and yelled at it to just leave us alone, and that it wasn't welcome here. And believe it or not, since then it stopped. So I don't know if exactly what I did worked, but my sister is still living there to this day, and hasn't had any problems since. Story 8. This is my final story, and needs some explaining. Me and one of my sisters planned a movie night together. I got a key to her house, and she was not there, so I let myself in. I overlooked a text on my phone that she will be in a bit later, because something happened at the hospital where she works as a nurse. So at one point I get bored and started to play with her dog, taking pictures and the like. When I was reviewing my pictures, I noticed something. There was a face in one of the pictures. Now, it's not a reflection. My face is much bigger and I have a full beard, and I still do. In the room where I took the picture, there are no posters, paintings or TV screens or anything with a reflective surface. I found it really creepy, and I wonder if there are still things in the house. I've had so many paranormal experiences in my early childhood. I could probably fill a book with them all. The scariest things are about some of the things that happened when my animals died. For one, when my parents split up for a little bit, and my mum moved me and my 3 siblings to the next town over. I was in 3rd grade at the time. We moved into a 2-bedroom trailer on an old woman's property. This is southeast Texas, so it's very woodsy in the area. There was something eerie about the property itself though. Even during the day, My siblings and I didn't like to be outside by ourselves because it felt like someone was looming over your shoulder. It was even creepier at night, since there wasn't any streetlight to see very well. At some point, my dad started coming over to visit, and eventually started staying over sometimes. I didn't fully grasp that my parents had been split up, so I didn't really think about why my dad wouldn't always spend the night. One night, when my dad was there, we were all watching TV in the living room area, when all of a sudden we hear a knock on the door. My middle sister Ash got up to check the window, and in the door that had a small curtain over it, she pulled it back and looked at my dad with nervous confusion and said there was a man out there. This was around 9 at night, so my dad looked concerned and annoyed and got up to investigate, wondering who the hell was coming by this late. He looked out the window, walked onto the outside of the porch, and came back a moment later and said no one was there. My sister went pale and her eyes got wide. She said that there was a man there, or she assumed a man. He was in a long trench coat-like jacket with a wide-rim hat on his head and hid his face. She said he was just kind of in the shadows. My dad made sure the door was locked, and we all had a bit of a chill. Some time passed, and the eerie feeling of someone looming over us was a constant in the house and outside. My mum would tell us that if we ever got too scared, to say a prayer and rebuke the bad thing in Jesus' name. I had a dream one night about my family being chased by a cloaked figure. Then by the end of the dream, I faced that figure and got a glimpse of a wolf-like figure underneath it, with a dark hood. A few weeks later, I had another dream of all of us coming home in the middle of the night, with a suitcase as if I'd gone on vacation or something. In this dream, my dad was trying to unlock the front door of the trailer, where I heard a growl from underneath the house. Trailers have a skirt to hide the underside of the house, and I heard the growl come from behind that, and it got louder and closer as my dad fumbled to unlock the door until it was right under our feet. Then I woke up. Those dreams, I believe, were a warning for what was to come. A week or so goes by, and it's early summer with no school. My mom leaves my sister and I to clean the house, while her and my younger brother go and do errands. Not long after she leaves, my sister and I are in our bedroom and hear distinct footsteps walking through the house. We were too scared to check, so we stayed in the bedroom with all the doors locked until she got back. This happened for more than 2 days, so when my mother and brother were gone, and my dad being at work, on the 3rd day, my mum told us if we didn't clean by the time she got back, we would all get our butts whooped when my dad came home. So even though we heard the creepy footsteps, my older sister dragged me out to help clean. When we were done, we sat in the living area, the living room and kitchen, as they were the same room, and I drew my name in the freshly mopped floor as it dried. After a moment, I had the urge to look towards the middle of the floor, and I saw something and leaned forward with my hands and knees to check it out. My blood went cold. On the middle of the floor, there was an already dry patch in the shape of a wolf or some type of canine. I told my sister to look, but she refused because she didn't want to be scared, but insisted until she finally caved and began leaning her chair forward. The moment she did so, that speedy hum the refrigerator sometimes made clicked off, and there was this terrifying deep breathing that came from the refrigerator. It sounded like an astronaut or Darth Vader. My sister and I ran outside, screaming. When my mum got home, she checked the fridge and floor and saw nothing. She laughed it off. A few weeks later, We'd gone to a week-long camp outside of town. We had a large cage with rabbits. Each of us had one. My brother and I had two. And we had a dog named Spot, a black cat who had two kittens, and I had just gotten a cat named Gracie. The rabbits were in a cage about 4 feet off the ground, with a large piece of tin on the top, with a brick on top of that, to keep any predators out and guard from the rain. The other animals roamed around the yard as they pleased. While my siblings and I were away, my older rabbit had babies, so my dad put a box in her room of the cage to make it more comfy. The day we got back, we had dinner at my grandma's and didn't go to the trailer until the next morning. I remember when we pulled into the house and my older two sisters got out the car and decided to exit to see their rabbits. I was still getting out when I heard my sister scream. Initially, I thought my sister hurt herself, but she was pointing at her and my other half-sister's rabbit cage. It was as if someone had grabbed its neck and peeled the skin back off the rabbit. The other had her feet chewed off, along with the male in the next room of the cage, except the poor male was still alive and the two others were dead. My brother and I ran to our respective rabbits, and the mother's rabbit was safe in her box, except that only one of her babies was still in the box with her. Upon further inspection of the surrounding yard, we found the other babies had somehow been pulled out of the cage and thrown across the yard, dead. I checked my younger rabbit and found an even more horrible sight. From the neck to the pelvis was only bone. I couldn't understand how this happened, since there were no other holes than the normal tiny ones on the cage. The tin and rocks on top hadn't been disturbed either. I was still studying the carnage with my brother when he called my name from behind me. I turned and he was pointing to a pile of raked up pine needles, and my cat Gracie perched on top of it, laying down on her side with her head as if she was looking at something. My brother said with tears on his face, "I think something's wrong with Gracie." My eyes went back to her, and I studied her as I gently called her name and clicked my tongue to get her attention. But she was still, too still. I realized as I got closer and started desperately calling her name and began crying again. She was just staring blankly at nothing. I was too terrified to touch her. So my grandma, who had come with us to the house, went to the other side of the house and grabbed a hoe. She stuck the hoe under the cat and flipped it over. She was stiff, dead. One of the other kittens was never found though we found our dog Spot and the mama cat with her remaining kitten in the far back corner underneath the trailer. My dad had to crawl all the way under to get them because they refused to exit. Spot was a fox terrier mix and would never come unless my dad called him. It was a terrible experience, and it would not be the last time animals died under circumstances that were strange. But it was definitely not the worst. I think the dreams and floor incidents were a warning. I had fallen on hard times back around 2008. I was in a domestic violence shelter. There would be days where I would go to take a nap during the day, and just after falling asleep, I would be awoken by what felt like someone gently kicking my bed. The sensation was like when you want to be awoken by someone who is sleeping and gently kick the bed awake. Anyway, every time I woke up, there was never anyone there. I would always check the door to my room, and it would always be locked. Now, of course, staff had keys to the doors, so I always assumed maybe it was a staff member. but no one was ever there. Also, I would feel the mattress move as if someone sat on the bed while I was laying there. Then after a few seconds, the mattress would go back to its normal state, as if a person had stood back up. Again, no one was in the room. This had happened about 3 or 4 times, so I shrugged it off. Now, I made a few friends while there, but I've never mentioned this to anyone. I didn't want them to think me crazy or anything. So anyway, one day I got a roommate in that room. Her name was Jane. There was never another incident after she moved in. I then was moved down to a single room since Jane was having her toddler son put in her room. I moved to the single room without any incidents. So sometime within the next week, we're all hanging out and talking. There was a point where Jane just interrupted whatever conversation we were all having and asking, "Did anything happen to you while you were in the room?" I looked up at her and was like, "What?" I wasn't going to just blurt out my experience thinking she was talking about something else. And she was like, "Oh, I don't know, like the bed bouncing up and down or something." I was like, "Well, it sometimes would feel like someone was trying to wake me up or sat on my bed when I was there." She also stated that a few of her son's electronic toys would turn on all by themselves in the middle of the night. So I guess there had to be something in that room. For years later, it occurred to me that there would be times, years ago, that I would feel my daughter tap me when I slept. When I woke up, she wouldn't be in my room. This happened often throughout my life, but I haven't felt it for some years now. There's also an incident where I was sleeping over my then boyfriend's house in '98, and I awoke to see a woman. She had no face and she was all white, and it appeared as if she were made of light. The room was pitch black, and no light emitted off her, but it looked like she was made of light, with long hair, and it looked like it was just blowing in a gentle breeze, while she wore a white dress, and she pointed to me and spoke. But it seemed like she was speaking from inside my head. All she said was, "Get out." Her tone was angry, but not loud nor menacing. I remember just looking at her and saying, "No?" and rolled back over and went to sleep. I felt no fear when I saw her. I spoke to a nurse practitioner about these experiences, and she figured I must have a spirit attached to me. That's when it all began to make sense. Back in my college days when I was about 19, my friend and I had played with a Ouija board. I broke 2 of the rules. I played by myself, and I was quite tired. So whatever spirit I was speaking with may have attached to me. I never felt it to be a bad spirit, as whenever any of these incidences happened, I never felt scared or in danger. I did, however, every now and then, feel like it wanted me to pay attention to it, like maybe it had something to tell me. She would eventually start telling me to leave it alone, and come back later, because it would always come back when I tried to sleep, and was too tired to communicate. I haven't felt it in years, and wondered if it just moved on, or gave up trying to reach me since I would always just brush it off. We have a ton of back roads near our town in Pennsylvania that my friend and I love exploring because they just take you to random old farms or hidden trails in the forest. We do this a lot to pass the time. So my 2 friends leave my boyfriend's house, as I stayed there because I was spending the night with him, and they decided to go exploring. They got down the road that they've never seen before, and are just driving on it for about 15 minutes, until they come across a house. The house is white and deserted. except for the light of a fridge in the kitchen that they can now see through the window. Creepy, but they carry on. They go further down the road and come to the end. A house in front of them with a garage on the side. The garage door is open and no lights are on. It's already creepy enough, and they decide to turn around when they see something. A dog walks out of the garage and just stares at them. They told me it had a very human-like face. I've asked them both about it separately, years apart. They don't know what they saw, but they said that this creature had the face of a human and the body of a dog. Maybe it was a pit bull, something with a human-like face. No, face of a human, too sentient looking. They're screaming and freaking out because they can hardly process what they're looking at. They actually went back a second time because they were so in shock about the whole thing. The same thing happens. The creature walks out of the garage and calmly stares at them. They turned the car around and sped away, never looking back. Another weird thing is that as they were speeding away terrified, they remembered passing an old pickup truck on the road. About 5 minutes later, going to the exact same direction, they passed the exact same truck once again. The road was one way, surrounded by trees. Maybe it was a bizarre coincidence, but it looked like the exact same truck, parked in the exact same space. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed tonight's ghost stories, one of my very favourite topics. If you did, please do not forget to drop a like and leave a comment with your thoughts down below. I also want to thank each and every one of you who, again, has gone over and subscribed to my good friend Briefcase. I am astounded. In the last few days, he went from just under 5,000, which was his goal, smashed it, and has now hit 6,000, which is absolutely insane. Thank you to each and every one of you who has checked out his channel. It really does mean a lot to me. He's a great friend, and it is so nice to see his channel grow, because he deserves it and he works really hard at it. If you haven't checked it out, I'll leave a link at the end of the video and in the description for you to do so if you are so inclined. It's all true crime stuff. He tries to focus on crimes that no one has ever heard of, and so far he's done a really good job doing that. And yeah, sort of like Kaylee Elise, but stuff from years ago, and the cases are solved, not unsolved. So yeah, just genuinely awesome content that I wholeheartedly recommend. If there's a story that you would like to share, perhaps a paranormal experience that's happened to you, feel free to send it to my email or drop it to my Reddit page. Either are fine, and it is always incredibly appreciated. Please just be sure to include plenty of paragraphing and punctuation to your stories to maximize the chances of it being read. Because without that, it is hard to select a story like those to be narrated. But anyway, for now guys, the time has come for me to sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.